I'm Chris, and today we're going to see what it takes to fix a broken intake valve. Let's do this real quick. Shortly after I installed a carburetor rebuild kit in the carburetor, I noticed something wasn't quite right. There was actually flames shooting out of the air intake. Now that's not supposed to be that way, so there's obviously something going on. So we're going to start by removing the throttle control. Take note of the orientation of the throttle linkage going from the governor arm to the carburetor throttle lever. After you have removed the carburetor, we're going to have better access to this breather cover that we have to take off, and behind there is going to be the valves and everything that we really need to work on. You want to pay attention to the order that you take the seal off, the gasket off, the breather plate off, and even the other gasket. You can see the keepers lying on the bottom there, and then you can also see the broken spring retainer. Now to gain access to these parts that are broken and really go ahead and repair them, or rather replace them, we're going to have to take the cylinder head off. And to do that, you simply have to remove the gas tank just a little bit, kind of tilt it out of the way, and then carefully take every single bolt out. Then once you remove the cylinder head, you want to be careful that you don't rip the gasket. To see the relationship between the piston, the intake valve, and the exhaust valve, just go ahead and slowly pull the pull start to crank your engine over a little bit. Now when the intake valve is at its lowest position, it definitely shouldn't move like this, and it really shouldn't come out at all. You can obviously see the broken spring retainer, and you can slightly see the wear on the keepers themselves. Now when buying new old stock like this, you might have to clean it up a little bit. Don't forget, it's been sitting on the shelves for a number of years, so being a little rusty or something like that really isn't a huge issue as long as you can clean it up. Now the inside is what is in contact with the valve stem itself, and you can see the amount of wear that's inside there when taking a closer look at these keepers. We can also see how nice the new old spring retainers cleaned up so that we can actually use them in our engine. My best recommendation, if you're going to tackle a job like this yourself, you want to get a spring compressor, whether it's the C-clamp style or the other style that kind of compresses the spring and everything down for you. But you definitely need something. To do this by hand is going to be kind of ridiculous. Unfortunately, I didn't have those tools, so I had to improvise a little bit. And our main goal is really to compress this spring with the spring retainer inside there so that we can insert the valve, so that we can get the valve stem exposed enough to where you can get the keepers on there, and then release everything and hope everything stays in place. Those keepers are really just held in place from the spring tension being pushed onto the spring retainer, and everything is just held in place in that respect. So it's a little bit difficult, it's a little bit tricky, and it's a little bit fun to work on. Now this is my improvised spring compression tool. It's really just a couple pieces of scrap metal that I found laying around, some sort of bracket or something like that, 2/4 inch all thread bolts that I used to really compress that spring. There wasn't so much compression that we needed because you could really compress the spring by hand. The bigger problem was finding something that would compress it, hold it for me, and actually give me enough clearance to get it inside the engine. Now with the spring in place, the other obstacle was using a screwdriver and kind of compressing that spring up enough to slip the spring retainer in place. Not having the right tools kind of makes you get a little bit creative in how you get the job done. And honestly, as long as the job gets done and you don't further damage anything and it actually gets fixed, good for you for thinking outside the box. I went and cut a couple pieces of wood so that I can kind of make a little wooden wedge, the height that I needed to compress that spring so I can get those keepers in place. And a little trick is to put just a little bit of grease on the inside of the keepers so that when you put them in place, they kind of stick to the valve stem itself, giving you a little bit more time and a little bit more control, keeping those in there when you release everything. Now to my surprise, when I pulled the one wooden wedge out and then kind of lifted everything up and pulled the other wooden wedge out, everything held in place and everything went where it should. Now after rotating the engine to make sure that everything is in proper working order, it's a good idea to go ahead and check the valve to tap at clearance with a flat feeler gauge. After you're satisfied with everything, go ahead and start buttoning everything back up and putting everything back in its proper order. Now if you were going to go ahead and clean the cylinder off and the valves and stuff and any carbon buildup up there, you want to do so with a wooden or plastic scraper. When tightening all the bolts down, do so in sequence into the proper torque specification. Keeping your work area neat, clean, and organized is really going to help you when you go to reassemble everything later. If you have to remove that little bit of throttle linkage from the throttle control lever, you want to make sure you note its position and even mark its position on the linkage itself, so when you put everything back together, it's right in the correct spot for you. It'll make things just a little bit easier. As long as you took your time taking off the carburetor and take your time putting it back on, you really shouldn't have messed up any of the adjustments for the carburetor, and most likely you're not going to have to adjust your carburetor again. Don't forget to open up the fuel shutoff before you try to start this thing. Adjust your choke and your throttle control. Press the compression release knob to help start the engine just a little bit easier. And then go ahead and pull that pull start. Then your engine should crank over. And with an engine like this, it should crank over within one pull. Once you get it started, adjust the throttle and the choke just a little bit more to really get it running and warmed up. Once you're satisfied with the way that your engine is running, it's time to go ahead and replace the air warmer, and then the bracket for the chute control attaches to the airbox warmer. Now, with this particular snowblower, there was no air filter. I don't know if it actually comes with one or not, but you know what, it might be a good idea to make something up and put it in there anyways. Working on old equipment like this can be a great way to learn small engine repair, although it can be difficult at times and a little bit frustrating when you can't find the exact parts that you need. But in the end, you're definitely going to have a better understanding of how the engine works and how all the components really work together. You're definitely going to improve your problem solving and your troubleshooting skills. Just remember to have fun and learn something. I thank you for watching, and I hope you enjoyed this video. If you did and you found it interesting, or if it even helped you rebuild your snowblower or small engine, please leave me a comment below. Thank you so much.